What if salvation isn't exactly what we've always thought it was? Today, we're diving into a theological study that kind of turns a common belief on its head. It suggests that humanity isn't all heading to one single destination, but to two very different and very specific destinies. So, yeah, let's get into it.
And this is really the question at the heart of everything we're talking about today. We use that word salvation all the time, but what does it actually lead to? Is it a one-size-fits-all deal, or is the divine plan a little more complex, maybe even more tailored than we've been led to believe?
Okay, so to really wrap our heads around this, we're going to follow a pretty clear roadmap. First, we'll look at the main claim, two totally separate destinies for humanity. That's going to make us ask, what does it even mean to be a perfect man? From there, we'll see how a really surprising new definition of mortal versus immortal changes, well, everything. That sets the stage for a concept called divine election. And finally, we'll see how all these pieces snap together to create two very different but equally glorious final outcomes.
So let's start right there, with that foundational idea of the two paths. The whole argument we're exploring kicks off by challenging a really deep-seated assumption about God's ultimate plan for everybody.
So on the left, you got the view that a lot of us probably grew up with. Humanity's destiny is this single road, and it leads to a spiritual, heavenly life. But the argument we're digging into today proposes what you see on the right. It suggests that for most people, salvation isn't about changing their nature at all, but about perfecting it, restoring them to a perfect human life, right here on a paradise earth. That heavenly path? This text argues it's a very rare exception, not the rule.
But that phrase, a perfect human life, that brings up a really big question, doesn't it? What does that even mean? To get this two-path theory, we have to kind of rethink the whole idea of perfection itself. Maybe it isn't just a single mountain peak, but more like different, distinct planes of existence.
The text points to scripture like this one to make its case. And notice the wording here, a little lower than the angels. See, this isn't about being a flawed, wannabe angel. It's about being a perfect human, a completely separate and glorious creation with its own kind of honor, designed specifically for an earthly home.
This table, I think, makes the idea so much clearer. Just look at the mineral column for a second. You can have perfect gold, right? But that doesn't make it a step on the way to becoming a tree. And a perfect oak tree isn't just an imperfect human. Well, this text applies that exact same logic to us. A perfect human is the absolute pinnacle of earthly creation, but it's a different kind of perfection from an angelic spiritual being. Perfecting something doesn't mean changing what it is.
All right, now we get to the definitions that, honestly, unlock this entire argument. The words mortal and immortal. They seem pretty simple, but this text defines them in a way that might really surprise you. And that difference is absolutely crucial to understanding the two destinies.
Okay, you have to focus on that key word, liability. In this view, mortal doesn't mean you're definitely going to die. It just means death is a possibility. Think about Adam before the fall. He could have lived forever just by being obedient, but he was still considered mortal because disobedience, and therefore death, was possible. His life was secure, but it was conditional. Immortality, on the other hand, is absolute. It's a state where death isn't just avoidable, it is an impossibility. The text argues that this is a quality of the divine nature and the divine nature alone. It's an inherent, unconditional life force that simply cannot be put out. It's the highest state of being there is.
And here's where that definition leads to some pretty shocking conclusions. If mortal just means liable to death, then according to this logic, even angels are mortal. Now why? Because Scripture says that Satan, who is a fallen angel, can be destroyed. And if he can be destroyed, then death is a possibility for his nature. The same, it argues, will be true for restored humanity on earth. They'll enjoy everlasting life, sure, but on the same conditional mortal basis as the angels and Adam before the fall.
Okay, hold on. If there are different destinies, and one group gets this absolute immortality while another doesn't, that immediately brings up a huge question of fairness. I mean, how is this decided? Is it just arbitrary? This leads us straight to the challenging idea of divine election. Well, to answer that fairness question, the text uses the classic analogy of the potter and the clay. The argument is pretty straightforward. Doesn't the Creator have the right to design different things for different purposes? Some vessels for one kind of honor and some for another.
In this view, it's not about some people being better than others. It's about a divine plan that needs different kinds of beings, human, angelic, and even divine, for the whole thing to be complete.
So how does someone get on this special path to a new divine nature? Well, the text outlines this really demanding process. It starts with a call to this high destiny, an invitation that's offered during what it calls the gospel age. But just accepting isn't enough. It requires justification through faith and then consecration, which is a total sacrifice of your human life and all its earthly hopes. Only then, at the resurrection, comes glorification, that final transformation into a new, divine, immortal creature. It's framed as an incredibly narrow and difficult path, totally separate from the journey of humanity as a whole.
So after we've redefined perfection, mortality, and election, we can finally see the two huge outcomes this worldview presents. Let's look at the two distinct glories and destinies that come out of this whole plan.
And here they are. On the left, you've got the terrestrial glory. Humanity, restored to the perfection that Adam lost, living on a paradise earth. Their nature is human. It's perfect, but it's still mortal. Their everlasting life is a gift, sustained by their harmony with God. And then on the right, you have the celestial glory, that small, chosen group who sacrificed their humanity to be totally transformed into divine, spiritual beings. Their nature is immortality itself, that state where death is impossible, as they join in a heavenly destiny.
And this is so important. The text doesn't present this as some kind of competition with winners and losers. No, it frames both of these destinies as glorious and necessary. It's kind of like an orchestra, right? You need the strings and you need the percussion to create a complete symphony. This worldview sees creation being perfected through a beautiful and intentional variety of natures, both earthly and heavenly, all playing together in perfect harmony.
So we're left with this really powerful final question to chew on. If we entertain this idea of separate and distinct kinds of perfection, where an earthly destiny can be just as perfect as a heavenly one, how does that change the way we think about our own purpose? What does it really mean to be fulfilled? Thanks for joining me for this explainer.